Nestled deep within Canada's Northwest Territories lies a valley of breathtaking beauty, a place that cannot be reached by ordinary means. For decades, countless men have crossed its boundaries in search of the vast treasure rumored to be hidden there. Many have returned empty-handed, but many more have never come back at all. Could there be something far more sinister lurking within the Nahanni Valley? So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, you'll have incredible luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. Number 1. Encounters with monsters in the valley. Pausing to take his bearings, Lefebvre turned to see how far behind his companions were. As expected, the pair still lagged some distance back, struggling to negotiate the narrow trails that wound between massive boulders. Smiling to himself, he reached into his pack, pulled out a strip of dried bison meat, and continued on his way. The seasoned trapper had now been traveling with the 2 Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers for 3 days, and so far neither of them had been able to keep pace with him. To say that he took no satisfaction in their discomfort would have been a lie, for Lefebvre harbored little fondness for the officers. Still, it had been a hard year, and though he disliked the police, he accepted their generous payment to escort them, as he had few other choices left. The section of the flat river they needed to reach lay far from the nearest settlement, and very few guides had ever ventured there. From what he had gathered, they were searching for a prospector at the request of his fiancée. The man had apparently failed to appear at his own wedding, and Lefebvre suspected this was more a case of cold feet than a sinister plot. He had not gone much farther when something made him stop in his tracks. Just off the trail lay the badly decomposed body of a lynx caught in a hidden snare. The sight unsettled him. It was rare for anyone to set traps in this remote country and then abandon them. The old trapper stood chewing thoughtfully on his bison meat as the 2 policemen finally caught up. They showed little interest in the discovery, brushing aside Lefebvre's concerns, and so the journey pressed on. Before long, however, the trapper's unease began to find justification. Along the way they encountered more snares, each one holding the rotting carcass of a lynx or fox, all of them untouched. Lefebvre took no pleasure in watching the officers slowly realize the significance of the abandoned traps, understanding now that their mission looked far more dangerous than when they had first set out. Not long after, they came upon a boat lying half-submerged in the weeds at the river's edge. A quick inspection suggested it had likely been hulled by rocks, but there was no sign of its owner. They were now only a short distance from Irving Creek and their destination, but the pace of the party quickened noticeably. The fate of the cabin was evident before it even came into view, the air ahead thick with the smell of charred wood and musky smoke. Lefebvre hung back, watching as the 2 policemen drew their weapons and advanced toward the blackened ruins. To him, the real threat seemed more likely to be hidden in the surrounding forest than in the smoldering wreckage. When he finally moved closer, what he saw took him by surprise. The prospector's supplies lay untouched, stacked neatly in a pile not far from the remains of the cabin. The missing man's body lay nearby, his hunting rifle beside him with its barrel bent grotesquely out of shape, and in one scorched hand he still clutched a revolver. But what chilled Lefebvre most was the missing head. Lefebvre had grown up with grim tales of those who had perished in this valley, and he had no intention of joining their ranks. He told his 2 clients plainly that he would be heading back to town within the hour, with or without them. No arrest would ever be made for the death of Phil Powers, and sadly, he would not be the last man to meet his end under mysterious circumstances here. To the outside world, this was known as the Nahanni Valley, but to those who had set foot within its borders, it carried a far darker name, the Headless Valley. The Nahanni River Valley holds some of the most spectacular scenery in the Northwest Territories, and is also home to the region's highest peak, Mount Nirvana. Its beauty has earned it the designation of a National Park Reserve, covering a breathtaking 12,000 square miles. The reason its endless forests and mighty waterfalls have remained untouched by modern civilization is simple. The terrain is so unforgiving that the only way in is by helicopter. Those daring enough to gamble everything on a chance at finding gold had no choice but to press deep into the valley, living out of makeshift camps or hastily built cabins. They would vanish for months at a time, and most who returned came back empty-handed despite their toil in the wilderness. But in the year 1904, Frank and Willie McLeod staggered back into the town of Fort Leard laden with heavy bags of gold. The two brothers claimed they had discovered a secret fortune and would soon return to seize it. The following year, after investing their newfound wealth into tools and provisions, they disappeared once again into the valley. As time passed, those they had promised to share their spoils with waited patiently, but the brothers never returned. 3 years after they were last seen, Charlie McLeod led a party into the Nahanni in search of his missing siblings. What they found was the skeletons of both men lying in the ruins of their camp, their heads missing. One of the bodies was still tucked beneath a blanket beside a dead fire, suggesting he had been decapitated as he slept. On the other side of the ashes, his brother's arm was stretched out toward a nearby rifle, the blanket cast aside as though he had leapt up to fight off his own death. 10 years later, another search party pushed into the valley, this time looking for a missing man named Martin Jorgensen. The Swedish prospector was a hardened veteran of the Yukon, having spent decades chasing his fortune across the north. In 1917, Jorgensen sent word to his friend Poole Field in the nearby town of Ross River, claiming he had struck a rich vein. It was the last anyone ever heard from him. The following year, Field discovered Jorgensen dead in his burned-out cabin, his head also missing. 4 years later, two prospectors stumbled upon the frozen body of a trapper named John O'Brien. The former soldier had survived the horrors of the Great War, only to meet his fate in the Nahanni. The manner of his death shocked those who found him. O'Brien sat upright, fully clothed, frozen solid beside the smoldering remains of his campfire. It was as if he had been flash-frozen in an instant, for in one hand he still clutched a cup of coffee, even though he sat beside flames that still burned. Not long after that discovery, another body was found in a hauntingly familiar location. Yukon Fisher, a notorious troublemaker in the region, had made his home deep in the valley since the year 1912. Those who encountered him described him as a giant of a man. The outlaw had fled civilization after, in a drunken brawl, he slashed a barkeep with a broken glass. Though the injury he inflicted was grave, the victim ultimately survived. But the sheer amount of blood lost convinced Fisher he had killed the man. Even when passing travelers assured him he was no murderer, Fisher refused to return to society. He survived by raiding prospector camps and stealing from the snares of local hunters. And then, he simply vanished from existence. In 1927, the skeleton of a tall man was discovered lying in the undergrowth near Bennett Creek, only a few yards from where the McLeod brothers had been slain. Beside it lay a rifle, its barrel inexplicably bent, and the charred remnants of a shelter. In 1927, the skeleton of a tall man was discovered in the undergrowth near Bennett Creek, only a few yards from where the McLeod brothers had met their fate. Beside him lay a rifle with its barrel inexplicably bent, along with the charred remains of a cabin. As unsettling as the murders committed in the Nahanni Valley were, they were matched in horror by the many mysterious disappearances of travelers who passed through this land. The circumstances of their vanishings were every bit as baffling as the grisly condition in which so many of the valley's victims were found. In 1926, May Lafferty joined a hunting party bound for the Headless Valley. Somehow, she became separated from the group. Despite repeated search efforts, no trace of her was ever found, until several months later, when a native hunter named Big Charlie claimed to have seen a woman matching her description. According to him, while traveling through the valley, he spotted a figure scrambling up a rock face. She was naked, visibly distressed, as if fleeing from someone or something. When asked who he believed her pursuer might have been, Charlie said he dared not intervene, for he believed it to be the devil himself. Lafferty's remains were never recovered, and at the time she vanished, she had been close to the Flat River. 2 years later, another party moving along the same stretch of water also lost one of their number. Angus Hall, known to friends as hot-tempered and impulsive, grew impatient when his companions refused to quicken their pace. Determined to be the first to find a hidden vein of gold, he stormed ahead alone. The others allowed him to go, knowing it was pointless to argue, and followed the trail of his boot prints. But only a few yards further on, those prints suddenly ended mid-stride. All that remained of Angus Hall was one final muddy impression, as if he had been lifted bodily from the ground while walking. By 1936, 2 more prospectors had disappeared. Bill Epier and his partner Joe Mulholland had spent years scouring the Nahanni Valley in search of fortune. The burned-out ruins of their log cabin were discovered on the shores of Glacier Lake, but their bodies were nowhere to be found and have never been recovered. As with the killing of Phil Powers in 1931, no arrests were ever made for the murders within the valley. When asked who they believed responsible, the local Dene people placed the blame on a mysterious and ancient tribe. The Naha were said to have been the original inhabitants of the Nahanni Valley, yet they shunned contact with other peoples. Their very name translated to "the people over there," a reference to the distance they always kept from their neighbors. They were believed to possess powers that bordered on the supernatural. Naha warriors were described as towering in stature, immensely strong, and hiding their faces behind terrifying masks. Legend holds that the tribe died out centuries ago, but unlike other societies, they left behind no villages or structures. They simply vanished into the mist. The Dene maintained that the Naha decapitated trespassers as a warning, and that the killings were the work of their descendants. In 1945, reports surfaced of a miner named Ernest Savard who had been found dead in the Nahanni Valley. The man from Ontario was discovered lying in his sleeping bag, his head severed from his shoulders and propped upon a nearby rock. As recently as 1983, a hiker in Glacier Bay, Canada, stumbled across the belongings of a missing prospector. The witness later claimed he heard ghostly moans echoing from the undergrowth before glimpsing a mysterious masked figure approaching. Terrified, he fled without looking back. The murders of prospectors in this region bear an unsettling resemblance to the killings that have taken place in Arizona's Superstition Mountains. There too, whispers persist of a mysterious force said to guard a hidden cache of gold, the Lost Dutchman mine. Many of the victims found in that unforgiving landscape were also discovered without their heads. Stranger theories have been put forward to explain the bloodshed in the Nahanni. Carvings on nearby rock faces depict creatures resembling mammoths, and archaeological digs have uncovered their ancient bones. Could it be possible that some prehistoric beasts have managed to endure in this isolated place? One such creature, spoken of by the Dene, is called the Wahila. According to descriptions in their accounts, it was an amphibian, a monstrous hybrid of bear and wolf. It was said to crush its prey with powerful arms before feasting on the remains. Some believe the Wahila may in fact be a descendant of the dire wolf, the massive predator thought to have vanished long ago. There are also tales of strange beings known as the Nuknuks, hair-covered humanoids wielding crude clubs. The history of the valley records numerous reports of UFO sightings as well, adding yet another supernatural layer to the mystery of its many deaths. Much like the legend of the Lost Dutchman mine, it would seem that some hidden force is determined to thwart all who would dare to strip gold from the earth beneath North America. And whether the killers are otherworldly or all too human, they continue to strike from the shadows, beyond the reach of detection. So if one day you find yourself tempted by the lure of fabled treasure in the untouched wilderness of this continent, remember the fate of those who came before. Do not allow yourself to become the next victim of the Headless Valley. Number 2. The Miami aliens and the mysteries of extraterrestrials across the world. The world is filled with mysteries that defy explanation, and countless encounters remain without answers, challenging our very understanding of reality. In the gentle rolling hills of western Georgia lies a tranquil and picturesque location known as Pine Mountain. Yet it was here that an ordinary man captured a photograph of a towering figure, estimated to be between 7 feet and nearly 8 feet tall, seated atop Pine Mountain. What makes the incident even more remarkable is that it occurred only a few days after reports of mysterious entities began to emerge from several areas of Miami. These strange beings quickly became the center of heated discussion within the local community, with photographs and videos spreading rapidly across social media. This is how the man himself described the experience. That day, the temperature was about 57 degrees Fahrenheit, and the sky was overcast. When I first saw them, the weather was stable. As someone growing increasingly interested in photography and familiar with the area, I immediately noticed the unusual build of those figures. By my estimation, they stood more than 7 feet tall, with oddly slender frames. It was surprising to me, because this was entirely unlike any normal physique. I had spent a great deal of time here and knew well the typical appearance of hikers, which is why I quickly reached for my camera. Even though the distance made photography difficult, I could still make out details of their height and form. After roughly 1 full minute, they vanished beyond a ridge and were gone from sight. Their sudden disappearance left me wondering where they had gone and why they had departed so quickly. When I later learned more about the incident in Miami, I felt compelled to release the photographs I had taken. While it is possible they were costumed individuals, I found it difficult to explain why they would appear on the mountaintop. Another possibility was that some kind of filming was underway, yet the complete absence of anyone else in the area made that explanation equally unconvincing. The mystery remains, and I continue to wonder what true motive lay behind those strange figures. As with most incidents of this nature, uncovering the truth is often extraordinarily difficult. Over time, such stories fade into obscurity. Yet even today, among hikers in this region, legends still circulate about encounters with mysterious beings in the surrounding mountains. This has fueled speculation that an undiscovered group of creatures might inhabit the area. Some mountaineers have even claimed that in moments of dehydration or when feeling threatened, they have witnessed the sudden appearance of a massive being. From such experiences, many have come to believe that giants may exist on the mountain. Gradually, the story has grown into a widespread belief that somewhere within those peaks lies a hidden community living in secrecy, and reports of encounters with mysterious figures are not confined to the United States alone. In many other parts of the world, people have also described encounters with similar beings. This phenomenon suggests that sightings of humanoid entities are not limited to any one geographic location, but may instead be a far broader occurrence, perhaps even global in scale. These accounts have spurred deeper investigation into the possibility of such beings existing, as well as into their true nature. With the growing number of reports of humanoid figures across the globe, researchers are no longer surprised. They argue that the planet's vast mountain ranges may serve as sanctuaries for such giants. The potential to uncover great secrets has captivated many, sparking profound curiosity about the uncharted corners of our world. What is surprising is that historical records have, on occasion, mentioned encounters with giants on mountaintops. According to researchers, Homo sapiens, modern humans, emerged around 200,000 years ago, yet only a very small fraction of that vast span, specifically about 5,000 years, has been recorded. That means roughly 97% of our history remains unknown. During that immense stretch of time, countless significant events must have taken place. Entire civilizations rose to prominence and then collapsed into ruin. Unfortunately, in the absence of concrete evidence, we cannot fully comprehend their existence or the influence they may have had upon our ancestors. This reality reminds us that much of humanity's past is still shrouded in mystery. Century after century, innumerable civilizations and their achievements have vanished into oblivion. The untold stories and the unexamined knowledge of those civilizations have become the lost chapters in the great epic of humankind. Some researchers believe that our ancestors left behind cryptic symbols, signs that may serve as vital clues to decipher their way of life and their activities. Yet, archaeology occasionally produces discoveries that challenge our very understanding of history. One such example is the Japanese legend of the Utsurobune. In 1803, a strange event occurred when a young woman appeared on the shores of Japan in a mysterious vessel. The local fishermen were both curious and confused, for she could not communicate in Japanese. Unsure of what to do, they eventually set her adrift once more, allowing her to depart with her enigmatic craft. Local tradition often maintained that she had come from a distant land, markedly different from the native people. Some accounts even claim she carried with her a curious box when she came ashore. But what stands out most is that her vessel was described as resembling a spaceship, its interior covered with peculiar symbols. The Utsurobune story reflects Japan's deep fascination with extraordinary phenomena and its openness to embracing mysteries that defy explanation. Despite the limited historical information, the tale continues to inspire imagination, opening the door to many interpretations about the origin of the vessel and the identity of the young woman. The account of the Utsurobune appears in 3 different historical documents from the early 19th century. Although each tells the story in its own way, they share numerous similarities, even mentioning certain investigations whose results conflicted with one another. A more recent study by Dr. Kazuo Tanaka of Gifu University in Tokyo highlighted that the legend lacked detail regarding how the vessel moved, yet emphasized the strange assertion that it remained almost motionless upon the water. Such findings only underscore the complexity and mystery of the tale. In another investigation, while surveying an ancient cave system in India, Dr. Bhagat and his team stumbled upon an astonishing discovery. They uncovered a cave painting that bore an uncanny resemblance to what many would describe as an extraterrestrial being. What is most remarkable is that they estimated the painting to be more than 10,000 years old. Dr. Bhagat even expressed his desire to receive feedback from both NASA and the Indian Space Research Organization regarding this groundbreaking find. Such a revelation sparked speculation that ancient civilizations may have been far more advanced than we generally assume. Some scholars point, for instance, to a stone sculpture discovered amid the ruins of the Maya in Guatemala. This artifact features an astonishingly detailed image that looks strikingly like a modern astronaut carved into stone. Unsurprisingly, This mysterious sculpture has become the subject of heated debate. Some argue that depictions of gods as beings from distant planets serve as evidence of their superior knowledge. Others suggest that ancient civilizations may have possessed a profound understanding of astronomy, space travel, and perhaps even the existence of extraterrestrial life. This remarkable discovery, together with the cave painting in India, has added yet another layer of mystery to our understanding of humanity's distant past. The search for answers and the effort to decode these enigmatic relics continue to capture the attention of scholars and mystery enthusiasts alike. Number 3. The kidnapper of the Guyanese forests. Hidden deep within the dense jungles of Guyana, a chilling legend has endured for centuries. Locals whisper of a strange being known as Water Mama. This mysterious entity is said to dwell within the rivers and lakes of the region, and is believed to be the cause of countless unexplained disappearances. Unlike the alluring mermaids of other folklore traditions, Water Mama evokes only fear among the people of this land. Those who claim to have encountered it describe a ghastly pale skin that seemed almost unnatural. Some accounts portray it as human-like, with long flowing hair and eyes that glowed beneath the water's surface. Others insist its face bore a faint resemblance to that of a human, yet its expression carried something wholly inhuman. The local belief holds that anyone who dares to approach the water's edge risks being dragged away, never to return. History records numerous disappearances near the waterways said to be haunted by Water Mama. From one generation to the next, families have warned their children never to walk alone along the riverbanks. Despite these warnings, the vanishings continued, only reinforcing faith in the creature's existence. What is most chilling about this legend is the striking consistency of its descriptions across the centuries. Unlike other mythical beings whose forms often shift with time, Water Mama has always been depicted with the same haunting details. Fishermen speak of glimpsing a pale figure silently watching from beneath the surface, vanishing the instant their gaze fell upon it. Others claim it beckoned to them, as if to lure them into its domain. Survivors of such encounters often describe feeling as though they had been hypnotized, unable to resist its pull. Some recall being dragged downward by an invisible force, escaping only at the very last moment. All remain deeply shaken, convinced that they had narrowly escaped death. Skeptics argue that the disappearances can be explained by natural hazards of the rainforest, treacherous currents, hidden sinkholes, or predatory animals. Yet the native inhabitants, who have lived on this land for generations, dismiss such explanations. They know its dangers well, and they remain certain that something unnatural lies concealed beneath the waters. For if Water Mama were nothing more than a myth, why then have so many people vanished under such mysterious circumstances? Despite the march of modern science and technology, the legend of Water Mama endures. Locals still share the stories, still caution travelers to respect the waters and heed the wisdom of their ancestors. Those who dismiss such warnings often become part of the legend themselves, another name lost without explanation. The forests of Guyana remain among the last truly untamed places on Earth, where nature's mysteries still reign supreme. Whether Water Mama is an undiscovered species, a supernatural entity, or something far beyond human comprehension, one thing is certain: those who disregard its presence may pay for their arrogance with their very lives. Number 4. The mystery of the USOs. Unidentified submersible objects, or USOs, remain one of the most puzzling and least understood phenomena in the study of unexplained mysteries. Often overshadowed by the more familiar concept of UFOs, unidentified flying objects, USOs refer to strange entities or craft that appear beneath the water's surface, defying all conventional explanation. Reports of such encounters have emerged from many different bodies of water and have been documented by credible witnesses, including naval officers. The enigma of USOs raises profound questions about their origins and about what hidden realities may lie beneath the oceans. Accounts of unusual lights or strange objects underwater stretch back for centuries. Historical records suggest that ancient sailors frequently told of glowing forms moving beneath the sea, or of mysterious vessels rising suddenly from the depths. Although many of these tales were long dismissed as myth, they laid the foundation for modern investigations into the phenomena. Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, numerous encounters with USOs have been recorded, often involving highly reliable witnesses and sophisticated monitoring equipment. Many of the reports come from military personnel trained to observe and accurately document unusual events. One particularly striking case occurred in 1963, when a United States Navy submarine detected an object moving underwater at a speed far beyond the capability of any submarine ever constructed by human hands. The object was tracked for several days before vanishing without a trace. With the advancement of sonar technology, the number of USO reports has increased steadily in recent years. Modern systems have captured objects with speeds and maneuverability unmatched by any known vessel. This has fueled speculation about a possible connection between USOs and UFOs, with some suggesting that they may share a common origin or technology. Despite the growing body of reports and the progress of modern science, the deep ocean remains one of the least explored environments on Earth. The potential for groundbreaking discoveries beneath its surface is vast. As exploration technology continues to advance, it may one day provide definitive answers as to the true nature of USOs, whether they are an unknown form of advanced technology or something far more mysterious still. Number 5. The Shiloh Baptist Church Stampede. On September 19, 1902, thousands of people poured into the Shiloh Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, eager to hear the celebrated author and orator Booker T. Washington. His address was a resounding success, but as the evening drew to a close, a single misunderstood word triggered a chain of events that would culminate in one of the worst disasters in the city's history. The Shiloh Baptist Church in Birmingham had been constructed that same year, 1902, at a cost of roughly $45,000. It was an impressive structure for its time. Designed by a local architect, part of the building was erected using bricks fired in the kiln of Reverend Walker, a man who would later preach within its walls once the church was complete. The sanctuary was outfitted with more than 800 lights, a mix of both gas and electric, and could comfortably seat as many as 3,000 worshippers. The main entrance also served as the primary exit, a grand approach of 26 steps leading up to a pair of double doors that stood high above the street. 13 of these steps lay fully exposed outside, while the remaining 13 extended beneath an arched brick canopy, creating a kind of covered vestibule about 2 meters deep. Shiloh Baptist was considered a vital religious landmark, as it was the largest church serving Birmingham's African American community at a time when many other congregations still enforced segregation. In 1902, the very year the church was inaugurated, it was chosen to host the National Baptist Convention. Delegates, including scores of ministers and religious leaders, descended upon Birmingham from across the country to hear speeches and debate the future direction of their communities. Among the most anticipated speakers was none other than Booker T. Washington. Born into slavery but freed during the Civil War, Washington devoted his life to inspiring and uplifting the African American community. He stressed above all the importance of education, the dignity of honest labor, and the value of building successful businesses. Just a year earlier, he had become the first black man to be officially received at the White House by the President of the United States. So great was his influence that, after his death, the most politically dynamic period of his life would often be referred to as the age of Booker T. Washington. His appearance at the convention inspired enormous excitement. On September 19, 1902, the day he was scheduled to speak, people began arriving at the church hours before the evening program was set to commence. As the hour of commencement drew near, every seat in the church had already been filled, leaving the main hall sweltering and stifling. Still, more people pressed inside, crowding the aisles and forming a dense throng near the main entrance. By the time Booker T. Washington began to speak, there may have been as many as 4,000 souls packed within the sanctuary, with countless others waiting outside. The crush of humanity forced Reverend Walker to order that no further admissions be allowed. Police officers were present to help manage the situation, but their efforts were insufficient to prevent people from squeezing into every available space, both on the ground floor and in the balcony above. Washington's speech itself unfolded smoothly. He spoke with conviction about the dignity of labor, the building of strong communities, and the importance of guiding the younger generation toward trades, education, and personal thrift. As his remarks drew to a close, some began to drift toward the doors, eager, perhaps, to breathe in the cool night air. Recognizing that it would take time to clear the overcrowded hall, the Reverend struck up several hymns in an attempt to hold people in place until the passageways were clear. At that moment, a minor altercation broke out. On the platform of honor, where many distinguished guests were seated, two men suddenly began to argue. Surviving witnesses gave conflicting accounts. Some claimed it was over a vacant chair, others that one man had accidentally stepped on the other's foot, while still others recalled that someone nearly sat upon a seat without realizing it was already occupied. Whatever the true cause, the dispute escalated when one of the men reached into his coat as though to draw a weapon. In truth, he had none, but the gesture alone was enough for someone nearby to cry out. Almost instantly, another voice rang out with something equally alarming. Whatever the words may have been, some in the crowd near the entrance misheard and believed they had heard the single dreaded shout, "Fire!" And, terrified of flames breaking out within the overcrowded building, the mass of people surged forward. Those standing on the steps were knocked down, and those behind them toppled onto their backs. Trapped beneath the brick archway of the entrance, further disadvantaged by the downward slope of the staircase, the crowd was soon compressed into a single heaving mass, reportedly as many as 10 layers deep. The panic grew more frenzied as those pinned within screamed for help. Ushers inside the church tried desperately to reassure the congregation, shouting that there was no fire and begging the people to remain calm. But their cries of, "No fire!" and "Be still!" were themselves misheard, further feeding the chaos. Hundreds pressed at the doorway, raising clouds of dust that to many resembled smoke, intensifying the terror. The Reverend implored the congregation to stay calm, while several delegates and ushers found their way to side exits and ran around to the front of the church. The sight that met them was horrifying. A solid mass of human bodies, writhing in despair, blocking the entrance almost completely. Police and firemen arrived quickly and set to work. Within minutes, the panic over a supposed blaze had been quelled, but it would take nearly an hour to drag survivors and victims alike from the tangled heap. In many cases, even the most determined rescuers could not free those trapped below. Instead, they knelt among the living and the dying, offering water, quiet words of comfort, and encouragement until the mass could be pulled apart layer by layer. One woman, Annie Bradford, later recalled her ordeal. "The dying above me nearly tore the hair from my head. They screamed and clutched at anything within reach in their struggle for life. I asked one man who was trying to help us to tie up my hair. He did so, working as best he could, whispering words of comfort all the while. I saw that the rescuers were doing all they possibly could for us, and so I patiently waited my turn. Many succumbed where they lay, crushed by exhaustion or asphyxiation. Just outside the doors, some were found dead, still standing upright, held rigid by the pressure of bodies on every side. Ambulances came and went constantly, carrying the dead to funeral homes across Birmingham. The number of victims was so great, and so many had traveled from distant places, that identification proved slow and difficult. It would take several days before an accurate count could be made. In all, 115 lives were lost in this catastrophe, with many others left grievously injured. Fundraising efforts quickly followed, raising more than $1,000 to cover funeral expenses for the dead and medical bills for the injured. The disaster sent shockwaves across the nation and brought scrutiny upon the church's design. Yet suggestions that the structure itself was to blame were largely dismissed. The National Baptist Convention declared the building sound, with no sign of collapse or structural failure. In that era, concepts of crowd management were still in their infancy, and few understood that the layout of an entrance could itself play a deadly role in a calamity of this kind. Today, with the dynamics of crowd crushes far better studied, it is rare to find a major public building designed with steep staircases and narrow, tunnel-like vestibules directly before its main doors. Thanks to lessons learned from tragedies such as this one, the chances of a similar disaster have been greatly diminished, though never entirely eliminated. Number 6. The Lowermoor water poisoning incident. On July 6, 1988, a series of unusual calls began flooding into the communication center of the South West Water Authority in England. All came from residents in the same small area of Cornwall, and each carried the same troubling complaint. Something was wrong with their drinking water. It tasted strange. It left a residue upon their skin. None of those callers yet realized that they were in the midst of one of the largest cases of mass poisoning in modern British history. The Lowermoor Water Treatment Works was the facility responsible for cleansing and supplying drinking water across North Cornwall. Water was drawn from a nearby reservoir, subjected to a series of physical and chemical treatments to render it safe, and then pumped into the network of pipes that served the surrounding communities. To ensure purity, the works maintained stocks of a number of chemicals. One of these was aluminium sulfate, introduced early in the process to cause impurities to bind together, making them easier to remove. By the time the water reached its final stage, virtually no trace of the compound remained. On July 6, 1988, a tanker delivery of aluminium sulfate was scheduled to arrive at the plant. The usual driver was unavailable, and so the task fell to a relief man by the name of John Stevens. Unfamiliar with the route, Stevens arrived later than planned. When he reached the works, he found the place deserted, with no one present to direct him to the correct discharge point. Still, he had been given instructions. Once inside the gate, the aluminum sulfate tank is on the left. That simple guidance, however, would prove catastrophic. The site contained multiple tanks and manhole covers, none of them labeled. Stevens hesitated, unsure which one was correct. Mobile phones were not yet in common use, and there was no landline on site with which to call for further direction. After some 20 minutes of indecision, he chose a tank to the left of the gate and tried the key he had been issued. It worked, leading him to believe he had selected the right one. Relieved, he pulled the truck into position and began unloading the aluminum sulfate. What Stevens did not know was that the key he held would open any tank on the property. And the tank he had chosen was not one feeding into the early stages of treatment, but rather a reservoir of fully processed water ready to be piped directly into homes and businesses. That evening, residents of the nearby town of Camelford began to notice something strange in their water supply. It carried a peculiar odor. Milk curdled when mixed into tea. In many homes, the water ran black rather than clear. One man even claimed that after bathing, his hair clumped together as though coated with glue. Calls continued to pour into the communication center. On duty that night was Susan Jones, who immediately became alarmed by both the volume and the nature of the complaints. She sought advice from her colleagues, but the responses she received were dismissive at best. Later, she recalled, "I felt as though I was banging my head against a brick wall. Nobody seemed to be listening. I asked how I should answer people who wanted to know if it was safe, and I was told it was safe to drink. I was told there was no health risk." In the days that followed, hundreds of residents suffered stomach cramps, aching joints, rashes, vomiting, and diarrhea. Yet despite the flood of reports about adverse health effects, the Water Authority remained firm in its denials, going so far as to advise people to mix their water with orange juice to disguise the unpleasant taste. While encouraging the public to remain calm, they quietly began their own internal investigation. On July 8th, it was observed that the aluminum sulfate tank was emptier than it should have been. The truth was at last pieced together. John Stevens returned to the plant with an engineer, retracing his steps to demonstrate exactly what he had done. With this confirmation, the Water Authority finally knew the cause of the contamination. Yet it would take 12 more days before the public was officially informed, through nothing more than a short notice in a local paper. During this time, residents endured a host of bizarre experiences with their water supply. One man reported that flushing his toilet produced a visible fog which, when inhaled, caused an immediate nosebleed. A pet shop owner watched several guinea pigs die after drinking tap water. Many residents complained their hair had turned green. Farmers spoke of unusual numbers of livestock perishing. Others reported memory loss, nausea, and exhaustion. The Water Authority eventually attempted to flush the system with clean water. This process killed tens of thousands of fish in a nearby river and revealed another disturbing truth. The tanks had not been cleaned in years, despite a maintenance schedule requiring the procedure every 6 months. Over time, the more acute symptoms suffered by the people of Camelford and its surrounding villages gradually faded. Multiple inquiries were launched to assess the long-term impact of the accident. One after another, each concluded that the water had been safe to drink, and that the illnesses residents had experienced were nothing more than everyday ailments heightened by anxiety. In short, the problem was deemed psychosomatic, all in their heads. %? That conclusion has remained controversial for decades. Victims were denied compensation for medical damages, though eventually roughly £500,000 were awarded in a limited settlement, and the Southwest Water Authority was fined a mere £10,000. Later events only deepened the dispute. In 2004, a woman named Carol Cross died at the age of 58 from a rare form of dementia. Her autopsy revealed an unusually high concentration of aluminium in her brain. She was not the only case. Another local resident who underwent a bone biopsy was found to have abnormal aluminium deposits, while yet another who died of old age was discovered to have large accumulations of the element in the brain. Decades on, many residents still insist they live with the consequences of the poisoning. They complain of premature aging, symptoms of dementia, chronic pain, and heightened skin sensitivity. They continue to demand a new inquiry, this time involving experts in aluminium toxicity. Even now, such a request seems unlikely to be granted. Every official investigation to date has maintained the same conclusion: the water was safe to drink. Number 7. The Pepcon plant explosion. On May 4, 1988, an emergency call was placed to the rescue services by a control worker at the Pacific Engineering and Production Company of Nevada, better known as PepCon. He reported that an explosion had just occurred and that the entire chemical plant was now ablaze. For any business, this would have been a dire situation. But for PepCon, the stakes were especially grave. The facility was storing an enormous quantity of a highly dangerous chemical, one that served as a vital propellant in the nation's missile program. In January of that same year, the Space Shuttle Challenger had been launched under the auspices of the United States space program, but only moments after liftoff, it exploded, killing all 7 astronauts aboard. The tragedy forced a suspension of all subsequent launches while investigations were conducted into the cause, and this in turn set off a cascade of difficult decisions for the many suppliers involved in the program. PepCon was one such supplier. The company's plant produced ammonium perchlorate, a key oxidizing agent in solid rocket fuel. Ammonium perchlorate, or AP, is both an oxidizer and an explosive compound of great volatility. When subjected to extreme heat, it drives combustion of surrounding materials with terrifying intensity. With rocket launches suspended indefinitely, PepCon was left with the burden of storing a colossal surplus of AP. Thousands of plastic and metal drums filled with the chemical were stacked across the grounds of the facility near Henderson, Nevada, just a little over 16 kilometers from the city of Las Vegas. Though the plant routinely stored some inventory, it had never been designed to hold such an immense stockpile. For example, in the areas where the drums of AP were kept, there were no fire suppression systems of any kind. On May 4, 1988, workers were carrying out repairs on a steel and fiberglass structure used to dry chemicals during production. The building had recently suffered weather damage, and welders were brought in to make the necessary fixes. Believing themselves to be at a safe distance from the AP containers, and, having washed the area to remove residual powder, they set to work. At around 11:30 that morning, a small fire ignited near the welding site. It spread rapidly through the building despite frantic efforts to douse it with hoses. As the blaze grew uncontrollable and on-site extinguishers proved useless, plant employees were forced to evacuate. Those with vehicles drove away at once, while others fled on foot along the road, desperate to put as much distance between themselves and the fire as possible. Roughly 20 minutes later, a major detonation ripped through the facility. The blast fanned the fire further and consumed much of the remaining AP. At that point, a second, even greater explosion was all but inevitable. When it came, its power was staggering, later estimated to have been the largest non-nuclear explosion in American history, with a force equivalent to a 1 kiloton atomic device, or approximately 0.25 kilotons of TNT. Rescue services had already been alerted in advance by one of the plant's directors. At the same time, the fire chief of Clark County spotted a column of black smoke rising on the horizon. He instantly guessed that it had come from PepCon and ordered his entire force to the site, driving there himself to take command. But before he even arrived, the first explosion shattered the windshield of his vehicle, injuring both him and a passenger. One fleeing worker managed to warn the fire chief that an even larger blast was imminent. At once, he ordered his men to retreat to a safe distance. By holding back and waiting for the remaining chemicals to burn themselves out before attempting to fight the blaze, casualties within the fire service were kept to a minimum. Countless smaller explosions followed, and a pillar of flame roared for hours even after most of the explosive chemicals at the facility had already been consumed. Eventually, the cause was traced to a leaking natural gas pipeline that ran beneath the site. Once the line was shut off, the fire could finally be brought under control, and fire crews were able to approach the devastated plant. The facility itself had been completely leveled, and the blasts had wrought severe destruction within a radius of 16 kilometers. Residents across the area witnessed windows shattering, power lines snapping, and doors blown off their hinges. Around 400 people were taken to hospital with minor injuries, most of them cuts from flying glass. Investigators also determined that the explosion and fire had released certain irritating compounds into the air. Though not considered toxic, they caused a surge of hospital admissions with respiratory complaints, even in communities as far as 50 kilometers away. As a precaution, nearby neighborhoods were advised to evacuate. Yet traffic gridlock on the roads grew so severe that before the evacuation could even be completed, the order was rescinded. Closer to the plant, the devastation was unmistakable. Automobiles lay burned to husks, and homes were flattened. 2 nearby industrial facilities, a gravel pit and a marshmallow factory, in the land is entirely destroyed by fire. At an airport near Las Vegas, a Boeing 737 on approach was rocked by the shockwave, though it managed to land safely. Tragically, 2 Pepcon employees lost their lives. One was 56-year-old plant manager Bruce Hawker, who relied on a wheelchair and had no special evacuation measures in place to ensure his escape. The other was 62-year-old operator Roy Westerfield, who had been stricken with polio as a child and lived with restricted mobility. Perhaps realizing he could not hope to flee, he chose to remain behind to notify the local fire department of the disaster. In both cases, though the majority of workers escaped, no effective evacuation plans existed for their disabled colleagues. Multiple agencies launched investigations, including the United States Fire Administration and the Department of Labor. The Fire Administration concluded that the blaze had been accidentally sparked by welding equipment, while the Department of Labor argued that a natural gas leak from the pipeline beneath the site was the most likely cause. Initially, Pepcon sought to blame the pipeline operator, claiming the fire had originated there. Yet, despite lingering uncertainty about the exact cause, responsibility for the destruction ultimately fell upon the company. Following a protracted legal battle, Pepcon was ordered to pay approximately $71 million in damages, a staggering figure compared to the plant's insurance coverage, which extended to no more than $1 million. The Pepcon disaster was one of several chemical accidents that spurred the creation of the Chemical Catastrophe Prevention Act, later renamed the Chemical Accident Prevention Program. This legislation required hazardous chemical facilities in Nevada to meet strict standards for accident prevention and emergency response. Had such regulations existed earlier, it is likely that the Pepcon explosion would never have reached such catastrophic proportions. Investigations revealed that at the time of the disaster, ammonium perchlorate had often been stored improperly. Workers were inadequately trained. Certain buildings had been constructed of flammable materials, and smaller prior incidents had failed to produce any changes in operating procedure. The plant near Henderson was never rebuilt. Instead, Pepcon rebranded itself as the Western Electrochemical Company and relocated to a new facility near Cedar City, Utah. Unlike its predecessor, the new site was surrounded by a no-build buffer zone far larger than the law required, and it fully complied with the safety regulations established in the wake of the tragedy. Number 8. The Amagasaki train disaster. On April 25, 2005, a 7-car commuter train passing through the city of Amagasaki derailed in catastrophic fashion. The accident all but destroyed the train, inflicted severe damage upon a nearby apartment complex, and claimed the lives of more than 100 passengers. Japan's railway network has long been renowned worldwide for its speed and efficiency. The nation pioneered the high-speed rail industry with its Shinkansen bullet trains, and built a reputation for punctuality so exacting that delays are measured not in minutes, but in seconds. West Japan Railway Company, JR West, was founded in 1987, following the breakup of the former Japanese National Railways. The new firm took over a small number of Shinkansen routes as well as a sprawling network of conventional commuter lines. Among them was the Fukuchiyama line, connecting the city of Fukuchiyama to Osaka. Amagasaki, an industrial city of roughly 500,000 residents, served as the final station on the Fukuchiyama line before trains continued onward into Osaka and beyond. On the day of the tragedy, train 5418M departed from Takarazuka Station for Amagasaki at 9:03 in the morning. The train was already 15 seconds behind schedule. Only minutes earlier, its engineer, a 23-year-old named Takami, had accidentally passed a red signal at low speed, forcing the automatic braking system to activate and bring the train to a halt. This minor disruption pushed the service slightly off schedule. Matters worsened when the crowds at Ikeda Station exceeded expectations. The heavier passenger load meant that closing the doors and departing took longer, causing the delay to stretch to nearly 1 full minute. This was particularly problematic, as JR West rules deemed delays of more than 30 seconds on this line unacceptable. In an effort to claw back the time, Takami accelerated the train to near maximum speed through the following stations. As the train approached Itami Station, a warning bell sounded in the cab, alerting him that he was traveling too fast for the upcoming stop. Takami reacted too slowly, and when he finally braked, the train overshot the platform by the length of 3 cars. Reversing back to allow passengers to board and alight increased the total delay to 1.5 minutes. At this point, Takami telephoned the conductor in the rearmost car. Knowing the conductor was required to report the overrun, he pleaded with him to downplay the error, perhaps noting only a single car rather than 3. The conductor refused, cutting the call short and warning Takami that he was still running too fast. Ignoring the admonition, the young engineer pressed on, pushing the train close to its top speed in a desperate bid to make up time. As the service neared Amagasaki, it was traveling at 116 kilometers per hour, and it was here that disaster struck. Rounding a curve, the train left the tracks, the forward cars plowing directly into a nearby apartment building. Because Japan's railway system is considered so safe, urban tracks are often laid within only a few meters of residential structures. The result was devastation for both train and building alike. The first two cars were almost completely destroyed, killing everyone inside, including the engineer Takami. In the remaining 5 cars, hundreds were injured. The wreckage shorted the track circuits, causing every signal in the area to turn red. That safeguard prevented an oncoming train from colliding with the wreck. Its engineer braked in time, stopping just 50 meters short of the carnage. Residents from the neighborhood rushed forward to help, pulling survivors from the twisted wreckage. Rescue services arrived soon afterward. While ambulances carried the most critically injured to hospitals, those with lighter wounds were transported by taxi, police cars, and even the backs of freight trucks. Japan's self-defense forces were also mobilized to assist in the rescue. The work proved painfully slow and arduous. The apartment building struck by the train contained an underground parking garage where numerous cars had been crushed, spilling large amounts of fuel. This made it impossible to use any equipment that might produce sparks during the early phases of the rescue. At the time of the derailment, there had been roughly 700 passengers aboard. The disaster claimed the lives of 107 people and left 562 others injured. Once the immediate rescue operation and clearing of debris had ended, a formal investigation was launched to determine the cause. Suspicion quickly fell upon the young engineer, Takami, who had been driving the train at a speed wholly unsuitable for the sharp curve where the derailment occurred. At that moment, Takami was healthy, only 23 years old, with good eyesight and no medical emergencies. The braking system of the train had also been found to be in working order. So why had he been going too fast? Investigators concluded that Takami had likely been anxious over the train's 90-second delay and deliberately pushed his speed in an attempt to recover lost time. Punctuality is the beating heart of Japan's railway culture. Not only do passengers expect arrivals and departures timed down to the minute, but the entire operational timetable is built around seamless transfers between trains. A single delay can cascade into others, producing costly disruptions across the network. For this reason, JR West imposed strict discipline upon its engineers, requiring them to adhere closely to schedule. Those responsible for serious delays or platform overruns, as in Takami's case, faced punishment. Employees might be forced into menial tasks such as pulling weeds, trimming hedges, cleaning toilets, or hand-copying railway regulations. Many were routinely shouted at, fined, and left uncertain as to when they might return to normal duties. Takami himself had been disciplined in the past and was determined not to endure such humiliation again. It is believed that this pressure drove him to push the train beyond safe limits in order to erase the delay. Investigators also discovered that moments before the crash, Takami had briefly engaged the standard brakes, but he did not apply the emergency brake. Doing so would have compelled him to file a report and admit that he had exceeded the permitted speed. The fear of disciplinary action may have led him both to drive recklessly and to avoid taking the one action that might have prevented disaster. When these details came to light, JR West was met with furious public outcry. A wave of resignations followed, including that of the company's president, Masao Yamazaki. He was even indicted on charges of negligence for fostering an environment that contributed to the tragedy. The courts, however, acquitted him, ruling that the accident could not reasonably have been foreseen. Still, JR West as an institution was harshly condemned. Dozens of employees who had previously been punished filed lawsuits, and 61 of them received cash compensation for the suffering they endured. The company eventually reformed its disciplinary system. While punctuality remained a top priority, engineers would no longer face such harsh or humiliating penalties for minor delays. In the aftermath, Japan's Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, and Transport ordered railway companies nationwide to install speed control systems on sharp curves. Such equipment was placed at the very section where the derailment had occurred, and overall speed limits for the area were also reduced. The apartment building struck by the train was almost entirely demolished, with only one corner preserved as a memorial to the 107 victims who lost their lives. JR West also founded the Railway Safety Research Institute, tasked with carrying out long-term studies into the risks present within the nation's vast railway network. And that is the story for today. Thank you for watching until the very end. If you enjoy videos like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel so that you receive a notification each time we release a new one. 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 Each time we